Well, I'm very excited to be here tonight. It is so good to see so many people here who understand that we all have a stake in this effort to finally start making real, tangible progress on bringing people inside. Homelessness, good, yep. Homelessness is the single issue that I hear about most often from almost everybody. Community members ask me what we're going to do to rejuvenate their neighborhoods. Business owners ask about how we're going to make the city more lively and welcoming. And so many caring people ask about how we're going to make sure that more people have a safe place to sleep at night. And anyone walking around our city is left to wonder, is this the best we can do? And honestly, for a long time, it hasn't felt like we're doing our best. A lot of city staff and service providers and community members are doing incredibly valuable work every day, but progress has been hard to see. While we've been locked for so long in the same debates, the fentanyl crisis and a lack of behavioral health supports have made things worse. And I think a lot of people who care deeply about our city and their neighbors have started to wonder whether things could ever actually change at scale. And I understand that feeling, but I think it's mistaken. I made my career as a community organizer and a coalition builder. I know the power of working with people from different backgrounds and different interests and bringing them together around a shared vision for change. And there are so many places where I think we all agree. In addition to frustration, what I repeatedly hear from business leaders, service providers, community activists, and people living outside is that we can't just keep moving people from place to place and calling that progress. We have to aspire to something higher than just pushing an encampment around the corner so it's a problem for a different block. That does not help to stabilize anyone's lives, and it doesn't work for the rest of the city either. And we need to make sure that our parks, our trails, our public spaces are safe, welcoming, and accessible to everyone. And the way that we can make both of those things happen is to actually welcome people inside and provide them with the services that they need. And that is a plan that can bring people together from different neighborhoods and different perspectives to finally make real progress. And that's what we're here to do. I'm committed to opening 1,000 new units of shelter and emergency housing this year. And when we show that this works, that shelters are open, that people are getting the support that they need, and that neighborhoods are the better for it, we build the public will we need to reach 4,000 units over 4 years. Or what's more important, to dramatically reduce the rates of unsheltered homelessness in our city, the number of people who are sleeping outside every single night. And I know that these are big numbers, right? Especially when the Seattle Times reports that the city added just 13 units of shelter over the previous 4 years. So meeting this goal, I know, is going to take incredible focus from my office, from the whole city government, and from service providers, and from all of us. It will take new resources in a time of tight budgets, and will take the whole city pitching in to make it happen. When I first started talking about these numbers, I heard a lot of skepticism from a lot of places. Yes, there were certainly questions about the logistics and the funding and how different departments were going to carry out my executive order that set the stage for this work. But the most skepticism was about whether it was actually possible to build community support for new shelters citywide. Because the conventional political wisdom is that neighborhoods will always say no, that everyone wants shelter to be tucked out of sight in someone else's neighborhood, that it's better to just work quietly and follow the path of least resistance because the politics are just too hard. I don't buy that, and that's not the kind of mayor that I want to be. And that's why we're here today. Because I have also heard over and over again from people and from business leaders who actually want to be part of the solution. They just need to believe that we're actually making progress and that they're part of it. And I believe that all of you are willing to welcome well-run shelters with wraparound services in your own neighborhoods and the places that you live, work, and spend time. So instead of letting people battle over individual projects without any overall vision, we are looking citywide. This is a citywide problem, and it's going to take a citywide effort to solve it. So my team will be providing a more detailed briefing of our approach to siting, operating, and funding new shelter, showing our work since I've taken office. But before that, I'm happy to make a couple of first announcements about where we'll be moving quickly to open new shelter in the months ahead. So after careful review, we're ready to announce the first site of many to come. We have signed a lease on a property on Armory Way in Interbay. Pallet Shelter has been selected to build a micro-modular shelter where wraparound services will be provided for more than 75 unsheltered people with behavioral health needs. And I also want to thank Amy King, CEO of Pallet Shelter, for moving quickly to help stand up this new site. We are also expediting several shelter programs which were already in the development process, including the Glasyard Commons site, which will serve about 90 people in Southwest Seattle, Nicholsville's Brighton Village, which will serve about 15 people in Southeast Seattle. Thanks to my team's work, these sites could open months sooner than would otherwise have been possible. We are also in active discussions with several property owners for buildings that we can master lease and use as emergency housing, as well as other micro-modular sites that we will be announcing very soon. So these are just the first sites in what will be an ongoing citywide effort. I also want to take a moment to thank Governor Gregoire and Challenge Seattle, and 4 of their members specifically, Microsoft, John Stanton and Terry Gillespie, T-Mobile, and Starbucks, for partnering with us, helping us to move more quickly and scale up this effort to bring more people inside. And we will share more on that partnership soon. Thank you also to Council Members Strauss and Foster, who have been incredible partners in this effort. And I don't want to leave out the other council members. All the council members are working with us, and we're really grateful for their partnership. Thank you also to the incredible service providers we've been working in partnership with, including the Low Income Housing Institute, Catholic Community Services, Chief Seattle Club, Evergreen Treatment Services, the Downtown Emergency Services Center, Therapeutic Health Services, Purpose Dignity Action, and Emmanuel Community Services. And a special shout out to Allison Eisinger and the Seattle-King County Coalition on Homelessness for supporting advocacy around this work. And I'll say just one more thing. The fact that so many of you are here today really makes a difference. There's been this assumption for a long time that it's hard to rally community support around new shelters, and that it's always going to be a vicious fight where nobody wins. But you being here begins to tell a different story. It tells me that Seattle is a place where we care for each other, and that when we have a vision to do better, people show up to be part of it. So thank you all for being here.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our community event. As Danielle mentioned, I'm Nicole Stafford. I am working closely with an interdepartmental team that is really spearheading this shelter accelerator work. And I want to share in the spirit, as the mayor said, in the spirit of sharing our work, we'd like to dive a little bit deeper into some of the activities that have been happening over the last couple months and plans for the next few months ahead. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to step back just a little bit and highlight what the mayor mentioned about the different program models we're looking at and the different types of sites that we're looking at. The first being a micro shelter, otherwise known as tiny house villages. And we're looking at multiple potential public and privately owned sites to accelerate these. We're also looking at master leased apartments, and these are multifamily properties that could be used to house people in emergency, and RV safe parking lots. And then again, across all of these sites, we might have different populations and different needs, but we'll be following best practices, and particularly for those populations with high needs, which will be the sort of first priority for this first wave, we'll have wraparound support, behavioral health on-site specialists, and substance use disorder treatment. Thanks, Artie. And so I want to give you also a little bit of a timeline view. Who doesn't love a timeline view? And it kicks off with the mayor signing her executive order on shelter acceleration. And very quickly, the same day that that announcement happened, we got all of our department leaders together that have some role to play in shelter expansion and setting up shelter, and we immediately started on site vetting and selection. So that meant reviewing all of the publicly available land we have at the city's disposal, county land owned by the Washington State Department of Transportation. We also did a full effort to look at private property that might be available to us, and we even got some of our permitting departments and engineers and specialists together for 8 different site visits so that we could really kick the tires on these sites to see if we could set them up quickly. And then in parallel, there was a pretty big budget and policy development exercise we underwent. We brought, again, all of our departments together to lay out an end-to-end view of what it takes to stand up shelter and really asked the hard question of what could we do faster? Where are we, as the city, being a bottleneck in this process? And through that, we kind of gave recommendations where we thought policy could help us unlock some of these processes. So on April 4th, there was a community event at Sound Foundation, and we transmitted 3 pieces of legislation that we think are going to be critical to helping us move quicker. And then, since then, there have been many council committee meetings, and I do want to highlight an opportunity for everyone that cares about building more shelter in Seattle. On April 14th, there'll be a finance committee hearing that you're open to testify. And then also in parallel, and that'll be the theme of my talk, is in parallel, we are also going through a service provider matching exercise. So as we're finding sites, we're also thinking about who might be a suitable developer for the site, an operator for the site, and matching with behavioral health services. We had if you want to go back. We also had a roundtable with many of the service providers that Mayor Wilson gave a shout out to help inform our strategy. We know there have been shelters operating in the city for many years, and we can learn from their experiences. And then there'll also be a larger sort of provider summit happening at the end of this month. And then, as soon as providers and sites are selected, we get to do a robust community engagement process in partnership with them to make sure we're bringing along our neighbors and our key stakeholders. And then, of course, site development, which is where a lot of our permitting department expertise comes in, that we can provide this sort of wraparound support that we haven't necessarily had at the city to help navigate our often really complex permitting processes. Next slide. So I just want to highlight, we did the exercise. What does it take to stand up a shelter? You'll see there's lots of small steps that often happen consecutively. And so our challenge was, this might take up to a year. How can we do that faster? We should be able to do this faster. So if you go to the next slide, that meant what could we do different about provider selection? How could the city take a little bit more ownership in site selection and development? And if you go to the next slide, we magically turn it into something running in parallel. And we think we can bring this down to 3 to 5 months. But it really is an exercise in trying something new. And if you click the next slide, we really need legislation to be able to unlock this so that the city can take ownership of site and develop it faster and then pass it along to an operator who has the expertise to run the rest of the process. And then if you go to the next slide, I want to quickly touch on the legislative package that's going to help us unlock this new process. The first one is a signing authority for our Finance and Administrative Services Director. This is going to allow us to sign leases on private property to then work in parallel in finding a provider, get the site up and ready, and pass it off. And then there's a legislation around funding, $4.9 million to help expand shelter this year. And I want to note that both the signing authority and the funding are going to be going through the Finance Committee on that April 14th. And then finally, we have a census limit legislation that's going to allow us to expand sites that are already working. There are a lot of city properties that might already have a tiny house village on it. And so in order to make best use of our public assets and to really stretch our tax dollars even further in providing this sort of resource, we need to be able to do that. And that's not to say every model needs to be a large model or have a certain number of sites. It just gives us the flexibility to use our dollars the wisest. So if you go to the next slide, As Mayor Wilson mentioned, we did just recently sign leases on our 1551 West Armory Way, name pending for that location still. But it's 75 units, micro shelter model, pallet shelter to be developing that, and Emmanuel Community Services in partnership with Everybody Deserves Housing as the operator. And it will be focusing on a higher needs population. So we will be having appropriate on-site services to help support those high needs, including case management, behavioral health support, and substance use treatment. So if you go to the next slide, also want to shout out, as the mayor mentioned, we have already on our radar, these were already planned sites, but we're also rallying our permitting departments to really expedite the processes, and wherever a provider is stuck on these sites, figuring out how we can work through it and how we can get these set up. So this is also planned for 2026. And the next slide, I also want to touch on a little bit of the public safety aspect and community partnership with regard to public safety. You can kind of think about it through 3 different lenses, and this is something we've shared with council throughout this whole process as well, first one around operational safety. We're going to have 24/7 staffing and defined site boundaries at all of these sites. As far as community expectations, all of our residents who join these sites will agree to a resident community code of conduct to respect all neighbors and shared spaces in the area. And then we'll also have community advisory committees tied to each of these sites where neighbors can come and join monthly meetings to give feedback and work in partnership with the operator developing the site. And if you go to the next slide, I just also want to note 2 pieces on sort of neighborhood coordination. The Good Neighbor Agreement, every site, every operator will be signing a Good Neighbor Agreement to work alongside our neighbors and address concerns in an appropriate manner. And then around site safety design, this is something we'll be partnering with the Seattle Police Department. And as we're even designing, so very upstream in the process, how can we incorporate best practices from what's called crime prevention through environmental design? So that's CEPTED. So how can we leverage things like lighting and increase sight lines to help not only increase safety for those living in the sites themselves, but also for the surrounding neighborhood. And then we also have a fire safety review baked again into our design process, and then as an inspection to ensure that all sites are safe, secure, and meet our fire codes. So that was a lot of information, but just kind of want to show you where we're at. We're excited to soon be able to announce even more sites. And then I will say, I'll give a plug too, if you know of any landlords that have private property that is on flat, paved land that you think might be good for this, please send it our way. We'd love to continue to gather more options for sites. Or if there's a nonprofit organization with underutilized land, we'd love to partner with you as we continue to expand our options.
Cool. Well, I'm really excited to be back up here moderating this amazing panel. So I'm just going to ask our panelists some questions, and then I think after that we're going to have a little bit of time for the Q&A. So Ericka, I'd like to start with you. And maybe, I don't know if you want to tell people a little bit about your background, but the question I have for you is, public safety is something everyone cares about. From your perspective, what does it mean for someone to have a truly safe place to sleep at night?
Sorry. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Ericka Frodsham. I'm a senior outreach specialist with CoLEAD, and I come here with lived experience as somebody coming with many years living outside in the city of Seattle, North Seattle mostly, and decades of substance use. I've now been off of substances and inside for almost 10 years. And I now work with folks that are living outside in Seattle, houseless in Seattle, and bringing them inside to our lodging program. So that's enough about me, yeah. It's really kind of boring. Public safety is something we all care about. What does it mean for someone to have a truly safe place to sleep at night? I thought about this question a lot when I found out where exactly this meeting was being held. So when I started doing this work, I worked in overnight shelters in City Hall. And I remember being here, and in the beginning, it baffled me that people, once you entered, you could not leave until the morning. And it baffled me that people would come in for an hour or two and then leave out in the cold. And I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. And the more I've done this work, I understand now that they had to make that choice of whether they were going to be inside and safe and warm, or outside so that they could get well or not experience DTs because they needed a drink, or because that was the only time that they could make money to be able to survive the next day. So they had to choose survival or safety, and that's not okay. We can't have systems like that. That's I think I got a little bit off of topic, but in order for somebody to truly be safe, they need to be able to not have to choose which needs need to be met.
Thank you, Ericka. I want to turn now to Dennis. Can you talk a little bit about the role that businesses have already played in responding to homelessness and housing instability in Seattle?
Absolutely. Happy to, Mayor. Thank you. And also just want to recognize many of the providers, the residents, folks in the crowd here who've advocated and supported these policies, and we're grateful for you moving forward with these 3 ordinances. The businesses have been long active working on approaches to support responding to homelessness and housing instability. Many of the businesses recently supported the doubling of the housing levy in 2023. That's a record level of investment in housing across all levels of the spectrum, and really creates an opportunity to bring people inside. I had the opportunity to work for a housing provider for 4.5 years, and we created over 500 units of housing, permanent supportive housing, during some of that time period, and really provide an opportunity for people to get inside. The housing levy will create 3,000 new homes by 2030, and is just a really excellent investment and use of funding. But separately, businesses are also a huge contributor to the tax base that creates opportunities to develop new types of housing, and also provide services in wraparound housing, including enhanced shelter and permanent supportive housing. Some of those funding sources include Jumpstart funding, funding for social housing, and the new changed B&O tax. Those combined are many of the largest businesses pay those costs, and that raises more than $500 million each year, and much of that funding goes towards housing and homelessness. You've also seen a tremendous amount of investments from companies like Starbucks, Amazon, Microsoft, that have created thousands of units for people in this region, separately on the philanthropy side.
Thank you, Dennis. Oh. Thank you, Dennis. Awesome. Okay, and then Margaret, so you're a neighbor to a tiny house village. What initial concerns did you hear from neighbors when the village was proposed, and how has that evolved over time?
Thanks, and thanks for having me here, and I'm glad to see so many people here. Hope there are other neighbors like me here. And yeah, I live in Lake City, and around last summer, I heard about a public meeting being held about a new tiny home village in Lake City, and I went to that meeting not knowing where it was going to be sited. It turns out that it's about 4 blocks from my house, and I went to that meeting knowing that some good things about tiny house villages, but really having a lot of questions. And so I heard the questions that, There were my questions, there were my neighbors' questions at that meeting last summer. There have been other discussions since then, and just recently I helped organize a little community Zoom with people to learn more about the village now that it's just opened up. So, you know, one of the challenges with this in the neighborhoods is that, you know, in my neighborhood in Lake City, probably not unlike many others in the city, you know, there's been a lot of frustration with not seeing solutions to this problem. So this conversation, unfortunately, kind of starts there. It starts from a place of frustration, of some skepticism, of concern. Some people come in with fears, and you know, a sense of neglect. And the first reaction, therefore, you know, is sometimes a hard one in these community meetings. But what I saw happen, and what is continuing to happen as people learn about it, is once people hear about how this tiny house village is going to be operated by CoLEAD, it's really an amazing service model. It will be staffed 24/7. They have security. They have all sorts of services, that wraparound service model for the residents. There are required case management meetings for every resident every week to stay in the village. I've now volunteered. I got so excited about it, I volunteered to be on the Community Advisory Council. We're just about to start meeting, and there are going to be ways that community members can say, hey, there's something going on at this village that we need you to know about. It needs to be addressed. So what I've seen happen is that as people learn the nuts and bolts of how these villages will operate, how they're going to be staffed, how the residents will be served, those concerns start to fade away. And I have seen, like for myself, I really didn't have more time in my schedule, but I said, I want to help more with this. And I've seen other neighbors saying, you know, how can we donate clothing? How can we donate something to this? It's gotten people excited about solutions. I'm sure there's still naysayers that are going to have to see it happen. That's okay. But for a lot of us, it's the solution we were looking for. And I just add that, you know, some of the statistics I've heard are really impressive too. I had seen the Maple Leaf Tiny House Village be created some time back, and to hear that when last summer the statistic I heard was 59% of the people that have gone into that tiny house villages have now gone on to permanent housing. That's amazing. That's the solution we've all been looking for. So it's going to take some time and education, but I really believe that people in Seattle are ready to see this solved. So thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. So Ericka, coming back to you, what does meaningful support look like for someone to come inside and be able to stay inside, especially for people with complex needs?
I think that varies for each person, right? Each individual person, but really it starts with a conversation and rehumanizing somebody, giving somebody some hope that that things can look different and things can be different. It just takes some work. I think it takes a lot of walking alongside people and letting, you know, just having real honest conversations with people about whatever their challenges are, whatever their barriers are, and normalizing it so that there's a level of trust. Because once there's a level of trust, there's open communication and open dialogue. I've seen it happen many, many times where people come in and have been pushed aside for so long and pushed away that it takes some time for some trust to be built. And as that trust is built, they become more open and more honest about what's really going on in their lives. And through those deep conversations and trust that's built, when somebody's ready for some change in their life, to make a change, they know where they can go to receive those services. We all know that when somebody wants to, has that moment where they want change and they want to do something different, you don't have very long. And so like when you've built that trusting relationship with somebody that knows the resources and can make the phone calls and can get you to where you need to go to make that next step, it happens so much easier. I can't tell you how many times in my active use that I went to detox and I would make it through detox and there wouldn't be a treatment bed open, and so then I would return to where I was at and I would make it for maybe a day or two before, like, I was vulnerable, I was a woman and I was on the street, and so I needed something to keep me awake so I was safe, because I wasn't safe to sleep. And so like being able to have that support, that wraparound support, that so you have somebody working on your side to make sure that when if you decide that that's the route that you want to take, when you're done with detox, that you have a treatment bed open. And then when that treatment bed is open, what does housing look like for you now? What is going to be safe for you, right? And trying to do that on your own is nearly impossible. It's so difficult. But when you have built those relationships with people, and you have wraparound case management, and you have a community, you now have, and I'm not trying to be cliche here, a village surrounded around you. That just came in my head, I swear. Like, it just makes it creates a space for hope, which is where change comes from, right? Change stems from hope. And so that's, yeah.
Thank you, Ericka. Back to Dennis. Why does this moment call for a coordinated citywide response?
Thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate that question, and I want to talk just really briefly about DSA. So DSA is a membership organization that represents 1,200 businesses and residents throughout the downtown core. But also, many of you may not know that the DSA manages the Metropolitan Improvement District. One of my coworkers is here. He's an ambassador. Yep. Hey, thanks for the work you do. There are 165 ambassadors throughout the city, and many people don't know that they work 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Friday. And a lot of us who arrive to work later in the day see clean streets and don't see a lot of debris, and also see people who often have been helped or have been referred to services with PDA or with REACH or with the care team. And that can happen in part because those ambassadors are out there doing wake-ups every morning. And those ambassadors really understand and see they're the eyes on the ground and really doing that work every day. They serve from I-5 to the waterfront and Denny to the stadiums. And they really experience the gaps in the system. There are times where they face challenges where there may be people who are unresponsive, and it's difficult to get them assistance right away. So we try and work with SPD or Medic One and get them the care that they need. But what we realize is that we can't do it alone. We know that it's important to partner with groups like PDA, with REACH, with the Unified Care Team, to really try and coordinate an effort to get people inside so that they have a safe place to stay and they don't have to be worried about sleeping at night.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Yes. And yeah, I actually didn't realize that there were that many ambassadors, but that's such a successful and important program. So thank you all. Margaret, what has your day-to-day experience been like living near the Tiny House Village? And I know you spoke a little bit to this already, but if there's anything you want to add about what have you seen that helps neighbors, helps people move to from concern to connection with the village?
Okay. Well, so the Olympic Hills Tiny House Village, I think it might be the newest one in the city. So it just opened in February. And my understanding is that all of the 44 units are already, designated, assigned for people that are going to come in off the street. Some people have already come in. Other people are moving in. So we're still pretty new. But I took a walk down there today on a nice sunny midday, and it's a very nice looking village. It is tucked into an empty lot, and it's got a security fence around it. It's got great facilities inside, so it was all quiet and tidy there. And then I was really excited to see a Public Health Seattle King County van outside. So I'm a public health professional myself, so I got all nosy and went up and talked to them. And they are the street medicine team. And they come up to Lake City every Wednesday. They'll be regularly stopping by the village every Wednesday, and they were helping a resident with some foot care. And it's great to know about them, great to know that they're coming up and helping neighbors. And so these are the services that we're seeing. And it kind of comes back to that, what will help people feel more comfortable with it. And then what I will say made me feel more comfortable, and I think is helping neighbors feel more comfortable, is, if you're someone that has concerns about this, try to find some time, get out and go to an open house. Like, going to the open house for the Tiny House Village was great, because you go in and I talked to CoLEAD staff, I could walk through the village and see the facilities there. It changes it from being like, maybe a little bit scary or just unknown place in your neighborhood to like, oh, I know what's going on in there. I see what it is. I had a similar experience with Tent City 4 that is still in Lake City, and I'm glad they're staying in Lake City because they've been good neighbors with us. But going to one of their community open houses and talking to some folks that live there. I helped them move a year ago and discovered that the lights go off. Somebody needs to move more, maybe, or okay. Well, we're saving energy. Should I keep going? Okay, there we go. Okay. So, yeah, I think what can help people move to more comfort is getting involved in some way. When I went to help Tent City 4 move, first of all, what I heard is that the residents and the staff planned the move, and it's like they were so efficient that by the time volunteers like me showed up, they'd already moved most of the stuff. But I got to help some folks there reassemble a big community tent, which was like a huge jigsaw puzzle of PVC pipes. And we actually had a really good time working together, figuring it out. And I walked away wishing that all of my work teams would be as collaborative as the folks in Tent City 4 when we were figuring out why there weren't enough of this piece and that piece. And so, and then also through those experiences, I think what will help us all feel more comfortable is starting to really put those human faces on things. Maybe figure out ways that we can learn more stories about these neighbors of ours and the different ways that they are working to get their lives back together and the struggles that they have gone through. Because, when I think about times times are hard for all of us in different ways right now. We're all struggling with something, right? Everyone's just struggling with different levels. And the more we can kind of see each other on that level, I think that's where our comfort level changes, and that's where the progress really starts to be made.
Thank you, Margaret. And yeah, big shout out to Cher, who really know how to operate a tent city. Okay, let's come back to Ericka. What do people most often misunderstand about being unhoused, particularly for folks facing substance use or other barriers?
I think the most common misconception is that people choose to be homeless. Homelessness is not a choice that somebody makes. It's a I'm trying to choose the right word. I don't want to read this later. It's cause and effect. Something like any one of us is subject to circumstance. I know many people that are one poor choice away from being outside, one layoff, not enough to pay their rent, So I think that the misconception that people choose to be homeless is, well, I can't say what I really want to say, BS, but. And then another one that came to mind when I read that question was, I just recently heard this, and it's like embedded in my mind, is that people talk about service-resistant clients. And I don't believe that we have service-resistant clients. We have client-resistant services. That's not mine, but I took it. I think that most thoughts that we have without having a conversation with somebody and asking them the question why they're homeless is a misconception, because everybody's story is different. But what I do know is that they didn't choose to be that way. It's, yeah.
Thank you. And I think we're going to give Dennis the last word. Real quick answer here, because I know we got to get to questions. So how does housing stability connect to the health of our business districts and local economy?
I'm going to say that businesses really care deeply about their environment, about people that work with the businesses, but also about their neighbors. We recognize that this is such an important time to really make this investment, and I think businesses also want to communicate that we recognize that these ordinances are a great first step, but really consistent wraparound services are what's needed to provide stability and really address individuals on a case-by-case basis. And I think DSA and our members are committed to working with PDA, with REACH, the Unified Care Team. We are happy to have been working with your administration to try to find a way to not only support the creation of these shelters, but also create an environment where people can build trust and be ready to move into them once they're made available. So we're ready to work with you. We recognize that that investment is significant. The $4.9 million, as been referenced, is just the start. We've been advocating to lift a $11.1 million proviso that was put into legislation last year, but I think we need continued growth and investment to be able to provide that wraparound services and deliver on your vision. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dennis. Okay, so we're going to go to some questions. Let's give a round of applause for all our panelists.
Thank you, Ericka, Margaret, Dennis. We're going to run through as many questions as we can in a short amount of time. For those who still have questions, or if you're watching, you can send them to seattle.gov/mayor. You can find the Contact Your Mayor button. So I'll kick this first one over. How will you ensure that folks placed in emergency shelter will have opportunities for sustained housing beyond the World Cup?
I have a feeling that a lot of these questions are going to be for me, so not the panelists. But feel free to ask questions of the panelists. Yeah, so I mean, we're focusing right now on expanding emergency housing and shelter to help people off the streets out of unsheltered homelessness. And we recognize how important it is to be creating pathways to permanent housing so that people aren't stuck in our shelter system forever. So that's another thing that we are working on. And I just want to acknowledge that we're in a challenging time for that right now, where, for example, permanent supportive housing is under threat by the federal government. So we're having to make sure that we're able to sustain our existing permanent supportive housing and the kind of pipeline of new permanent supportive housing is facing some real challenges right now. So that's just to say we're in a challenging moment for this, but we're going to be doing everything that we can to expand the housing that is available to people coming out of our shelter system to make sure that people aren't stuck in shelter forever. And we're going to be creative, right? We're working with our affordable housing providers on strategies to make sure that we're making the maximum use of our affordable housing stock. And we're going to keep working on that too.
What kind of oversight will be provided? I hope the new shelters will have sufficient caseworkers.
Yes, so I think as you heard in the earlier presentation, the focus on these initial 500 units of shelter that we're trying to stand up are going to focus on kind of high acuity people or people who have complex needs coming out of homelessness. And so these shelter sites are going to have 24/7 staffing and case management and other services on site. So we're being very intentional about making sure that people have the support that they're going to need on site.
Curious what the opportunities might be for including safe parking for cars, not just RVs, in expansion plan, since about half of homeless people are in regular cars.
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a good answer to that. I know there's members of my team here who've been working on this, so if anyone wants to step up and provide an answer, but yeah, I think that's a good point.
Maybe that's one we're going to have on our facts page, soon to come, on the shelter expansion website. What will be the funding mechanism? What will security, public safety look like?
So we've identified, I believe, about $17.5 million to stand up these initial 500 units of emergency housing and micro shelters. So the smaller amount that you mentioned is what's going through council, but there's other funding in the city budget that we've identified that we're able to use without council action. And we're going to be working as we work toward the city budget process this fall to make sure that we're allocating ongoing operating funds to make sure that we can continue operating those sites with the services that they need. So that's a little bit about how we're thinking about the funding at the moment. We're also, as I kind of alluded to, working with philanthropic partners. So we're going to be probably making some announcements soon about that. But we're welcoming money from all directions to help with this team effort.
We have many empty apartments now. Seattle Times says 10% of affordable housing is empty. Why don't we use what we have first before building more?
So there are complex reasons why there have been higher than ideal vacancy rates in some of our affordable housing buildings. Part of this is a little bit of a mismatch between the kind of units that we've focused on building, so that we have a lot of, especially studios, and then just because of the way that the housing market has developed, we have a situation where often the kind of a private market studio is not that much more expensive than a quote-unquote affordable studio, so that's part of the reason. And then there's also been a lot of factors coming out of the pandemic that have affected affordable housing providers' ability to keep their buildings full, including sometimes mismatches between the tenants who are in a building and the kind of support that they need, their behavioral health needs, and a building that's not able to accommodate that doesn't have the services that they need. So anyway, that's just to say that the problem is not that people don't need that housing, obviously, and so that is something that we are working on in partnership with affordable housing providers to figure out how we can address some of those problems. And some of that might mean, one idea that we've been talking about is basically the city buying down rent in some of those empty units so that it's affordable to people at a lower income level. So I agree that we need to be using our affordable housing as effectively as possible, and also we need way more affordable housing. So no, we should not stop trying to build affordable housing in the meantime.
Can the empty gravel lots at Swedish Cherry Hill potentially be used as a site, or other major institution-owned properties that don't have planned development and expansion?
Yeah, I mean, we are open to ideas, so send those ideas our way and we can chase them down and see what's possible.
How will you ensure that shelter bed sites will continue to receive appropriate operating funding? How do you plan to ensure this continues to be funded?
That's basically the answer I gave before. This is a matter of how we design our city budget. So that's obviously something that's going to be very important as we go into this fall's budgeting process. And we welcome advocacy pushing from all of you to make sure that we have the funds necessary to keep operating these sites in the manner that they need to be operated.
Everyone just had questions for the mayor. None of the panelists? All right, what is the role of the King County Homelessness Authority now?
So the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, right, is basically contracts that previously were operated or were run through the city and the county are now run through the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. In this initial 500 units that we're standing up, the city, we're actually doing this in-house at the city. So we're not doing this through the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. And a lot of that had to do with, the King County Regional Homelessness Authority kind of already has its budget and plan for this year. And so because we're doing this additionally to what was already planned, we have found money within the city budget. And we're doing all of this kind of in-house also for reasons of speed. And right, the process that Nicole went through in the slide presentation, right, we had to do a lot of work internally at the city to compress all of this into a few months. So we're not going through the authority. I'm now a new board member at the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, so that's going to be an ongoing conversation over the rest of this year of the role that that authority will play in this effort as we move forward beyond this initial 500 units.
I've got the same funding question. So to close us out, I'm going to offer a different question to the panel, anyone who may want to speak to this. But what does it look like in practice to be a good neighbor?
Okay, I'll take a look. All right. Yeah, that was one of the questions that I got in advance, and I was thinking about that. And, you know, in any of my experiences with neighbors and neighborhoods, it's got to work both ways, right? So I think part of being good neighbors is that we should all try to be welcoming to these new shelters, these tiny house villages, and then we should also help them be successful by communicating back when there is a problem. And you know, one of the things that I'm glad of with the village in my area is you know, we have contact information so that if there is a problem, if someone's sensing a problem in the community or they have a concern, there's someone to go to talk to. And what I'm going to be encouraging all my neighbors to do is to use that, you know, communicate back and see if the problem can be solved. You know, let's resist the urge to just go rant on social media, because I can pretty much guarantee you that will not solve any problems, right? But there are systems that are going to be set up to communicate both ways. And what I also hope that we can do, and we've already been doing in my neighborhood with the folks that live at 10 City 4, is, you know, they're community members. When I see them at public meetings or, you know, at the farmer's market, say hi, welcome them. You know, they're folks that live in our neighborhood. And that may feel funny at first, but it's not once you get used to talking to these folks and realizing they care about the neighborhood too. So.
Thank you again to our panelists, Ericka, Margaret, Dennis. Again, if you have more questions, please send them to seattle.gov/mayor or contact the mayor, and we'll be putting together a fax page on the shelter expansion website. And to close us out, Mayor Wilson will share next steps. Thank you all.
Okay. Not sure how many next steps I'm actually going to share, but I'm going to say thank you to everyone for being here. So my team launched this effort out of a deep belief that we really can bring people together from across the city to join in and make progress in welcoming new shelters across the city so that we can bring more people inside. And today we're proving that to be true. It's a really heartwarming thing to see service providers, neighbors, formerly homeless people, businesses, the whole city coming together to address this crisis. I'm really looking forward to sharing more specific location details just as soon as those lease agreements are signed. And of course, the providers will be announcing neighborhood community meetings after that to discuss the details of each of these locations before permits are filed. We will make sure that that information is out there. And I want to thank our partners on the City Council for being a part of this effort in every way. And my ask to all of you is to stay engaged, stay involved, and make your voices heard, because we need you at every step in this process. We need you at those community meetings, we need you at City Council, and we need you there to welcome new neighbors into your neighborhood. So thank you so much. I feel really confident that together we can take on this enormous challenge and we can accomplish big things. And it ultimately is going to be because of all of you. So thank you.